Hello everyone, this is Steve with Aptera Owners Club. This video I want to talk about battery sizing, and this may be somewhat of a controversial video for a lot of people. Many of you are going to disagree with me, and I welcome your comments below. Um, but I just want to talk about the pros and cons of the various battery sizes, and I've noticed that a lot of people are interested in the really large battery sizes, the 1,000 mile or the 600 mile. Um, Batteries. And of course, these are 25 kilowatt hour, 40 kilowatt hour, 60 kilowatt hour, and 100 kilowatt hour battery packs. And of course, everyone wants more range. And all things being equal, more range is awesome. Like, who doesn't want to have to never worry about range again? And a couple of the reasons that people say that they want a large battery is because they do massive road trips, and they're worried about range degradation with cold temperatures and climate control use. And there is some validity to that. If you look at how much range you get decreased, you can reduce range by 10 to 12% at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a little bit below, a little bit negative Celsius. So a little bit below freezing. So 20-degree Fahrenheit is a temperature that's often reached in the more northern parts of America and in Canada and in parts of northern Europe. You can reach 20 degrees Fahrenheit fairly easily in the winter. Of course, we never get those temperatures in Southern California, so it doesn't really affect me. But it is a concern for people that live in colder climates, especially in the winter. So you are going to lose about 10 to 12% range, and then if you use climate control, depending on how high you crank up the heat, you could lose significantly more depending on how long your drive is. So let's say that you lose about 20% range, or if you really want to blast it, 30% range. They said range loss up to 40%. I think that's probably really excessive based on calculations that we've done. So, but let's say 20, maybe even 30% range. That you're still looking at to 800 to 700 mile range. And I don't know if anyone's driven 800 or 700 miles at a go, but that's a pretty long day of driving. And I don't know how many people do that kind of driving on a regular basis. The thing is that there are advantages to having a lot of miles. You can, these things like using climate control and driving in cold weather are less of a concern for you. But there are definite disadvantages to having this amount of battery unless you're going to use it frequently. Now, if you do frequent long trips and you need that kind of range, then yes, you should get the long range battery. But if this is something that you're going to do a couple of times a year or maybe several times a year, it probably isn't worth the everyday hassle of having that kind of battery on your vehicle for the other, 350 days a year that you're driving it. It's just for the 10 days a year or less that you're using the range that you have. It would be like I have a 15 passenger van. For the 10 times a year I need to carry 15 passengers, but the rest of the time I'm just using it as a commuter vehicle for myself and have to deal with the hassles of having a very large, bulky, fuel inefficient van that I drive around all the time. So of course that's everyone's choice. I'm in here. We're just talking about the various things that people should consider before they go with that. All right, so first thing to consider is if you look at all the current EVs, so currently as of February 15th, 2022, what are the longest range EVs? All right, so the longest range EV on the market is Lucid Motors Dream Edition at 520 miles. And then the long range Tesla is 405 miles, and the long range Model 3 is 360 miles. So if you get the 400-mile range, which is the second to the lowest, you would be basically tied as the second longest range vehicle available on the planet as an EV. And when Tesla Model S first came out, it had a range of like 200, and that was thought to be revolutionary. And if you look down this list, most of these vehicles have ranges in the 200 to 300 range. And that's kind of the common EV range these days, is like 250 or something. So the lowest model Aptera is going to have basically what the average amount of range of an EV is going to be today. So 400 would be basically the top end. 600 is unheard of, and 1000 is kind of fairly ridiculous. The other reason that people have mentioned wanting to have a large battery is because if you don't dip into the if you don't drain it down and charge it up all the way, you have less cycles, and then you have longer battery life. So that is something to think about. But charge cycles is only one of the things that determines battery life. So there's usage, so charge cycles. Then using high electric current, so fast charging, that degrades battery life. Operating at high or low state of charge, so keeping it at 100 or keeping it close to zero, that's not good for the battery. High temperatures are bad, and just time, just having the battery. Like if you had the battery set at like 60%, and it just sat in your garage and you never moved it for like 10 years, you would lose some battery degradation just without use at all. So energy cycles is the only thing that having a large battery would help you with. It wouldn't change any of the other things. I guess you could operate at slightly lower or higher state of charge, but I'm guessing most people, they say the average commute in the United States is less than 40 miles round trip. So most people, even a 250-mile range battery, they could leave it set at 80% and they would drain it down to like 50 or 60% at best, and they could just do that on a daily basis. So state of charge would not be high or low, even with the lowest end battery for most people's commutes. And then if you look at the historic battery degradation, EVs do very well. This is the range of all electric vehicles, and they lose about 12% of their battery range after about 7 years. 7 years of use across all boards. And so here, let's look at, let me see if I can refresh this so that we get rid of these other lines. Okay, so here's all batteries. Let's look at the Chevy Volt. So the Chevy Volt only has a 50-mile range battery before the gas backup kicks in. So that means most people are draining that thing every day. So they're charging that thing up to 100%, which obviously is not 100% because they don't the BMS system wouldn't let you use the full capacity, but it looks like 100%. And they drain it down to its operational limit, zero. Most people cycle through this volt battery every day, and still after about 6 years, they retain 95% of its capacity. So EVs do very well, even with high cycle time. And another thing that proves that is there was this company, they're not around anymore, I don't think, called Tesloop. Tesloop, what they did is they bought a bunch of Teslas, Model S's and X's and 3s, and they used to run a route, and one of the more popular routes was going from LA to Las Vegas. That's a fairly long trip. These vehicles, they put about 17,000 miles on them per year, and they had several that were hitting like 500,000 miles, and most of them were over 300,000 miles at the time of writing this thing, and most of them had like 10 to 15% battery degradation even after that kind of cycle time, and they would cycle their entire battery at least twice a day, every day, and they used a supercharger, so they were using fast charging every day, and they would cycle through their battery twice a day, and they put like close to 500,000 miles on these batteries, and they still did very well. They retained over 80% of the range. The worst one was 80%, and some of them retained 90% of their range. So you're not going to get high, even if you cycled through this entire battery pack every day, it's going to last you way longer than, it's going to last you like 500,000 miles probably. Now, Tesla had NCA batteries and Aptera is using NMC batteries, but their cycle times are pretty much very similar. Okay, and then the last thing to think about is the weight, the added weight. If you're not using this entire battery, you're carrying a lot of extra weight around all the time when you're not using it. So if you look at this IEE Spectrum thing, this is the only thing I could find about the weight of the Aptera. based on which battery size. And in this one, they said that the 60 kilowatt Aptera was going to weigh 1,800 pounds. And I remember seeing something where they said the 1,000 mile was going to weigh about 2,200 pounds. So I looked at various cars. So here's the various cars, and you look at their energy density. This is 100 watt hours per kilogram. This was a really poorly, it was not very dense. Most of them, if you look at the newer chemistries, so this one's really good, 168, 145, a 132. The new one's 152. Here's 140, 130, 150, 158. So it looks like 140 to 150 to 160 is where like modern EVs are running in terms of energy density, right? So I made a little spreadsheet and I said, okay, maybe Aptera has like really good battery building and they end up making a battery pack that's 160 watt hours per kilogram. If you convert that to kilograms per kilowatt hour, that's 6.25. And then here's the 25, 40, 60, 100 kilowatt hour battery. This is the weight of the battery pack, presuming this kind of energy density. And then this is the weight in pounds. So if you have the 225 kilowatt hour battery, it's good. Your battery pack's going to weigh about 350 pounds. Whereas if you get the 1,000 kilowatt battery, your battery pack's probably going to weigh about 1,400 pounds. So you're carrying 1,000 pounds more weight. Making this spreadsheet made me wonder, this is a huge range in weights for the Aptera. And this is assuming, so I based it off of this, and then I said that if the battery pack weighs 825, then the rest of the car must weigh about 1,000 pounds. And so if the rest of the car weighs about 1,000 pounds, this is the presumptive weight of the entire vehicle with these battery packs. So if you look at this, this is a huge range. It's 1,300 pounds versus 2,300 pounds. So the suspension's got to be completely different between these two. And they said that the Aptera is built to have a cargo capacity of 500 pounds, including passengers. So I'm guessing they're basing it on this model. And so if you have this, you theoretically could have a lot more uh, cargo capacity. And if you have this, you essentially have no cargo capacity, or they have to totally redo the suspension. I'm guessing that this model is going to take forever to come out because they're going to have to redo the entire suspension and bracing and structural engineering of the vehicle to change it to carry this much extra weight. So anyways, you're carrying a tremendous amount of weight extra all the time. And if you go uphill and downhill, you are going to definitely feel the difference in efficiency. If it's perfectly flat ground, it's only going to be like rolling resistance and air resistance. So you probably won't notice much of a difference. But if you're going up a hill, this 1,000 pounds or 500 pounds is going to make a huge difference in the amount of how efficient the car is, how much energy you're going to use to go the same distance. So if you're not using this, it's just a lot of dead weight that you're carrying around. Lastly, we went over this in this video, lithium mining and the types of lithium-ion batteries, but we talk about the environmental costs. Like petroleum has a lot of environmental costs, mining it and refining it, but making EV batteries has a lot of environmental costs too. The environmental cost in mining lithium and cobalt is not insignificant. So essentially, you're doing 4 times the environmental damage with this battery pack as with this battery pack. And so if you don't need it, why would you spend more $20,000 of your own money extra, as well as carrying a ton of extra weight around, as well as damaging, increasing environmental costs of manufacturing that, when the cycle time, the number of cycles of the battery does not seem to make too much of a real world difference. There's a theoretical difference, but if you're getting 500,000 miles out of your battery pack, you're probably doing pretty good. I don't think anyone's gonna worry about that. And then they also said it's gonna last longer. But however, if you don't need this mileage and you're just thinking you're gonna make it last longer. Let's say it lasts twice as long as the 400-mile range. Um, After you've put like 300,000 miles on it, and you need to replace the 400-mile one, the batteries will be much cheaper then. Battery on a per kilowatt basis, battery prices have dropped 70% in the past 10 years. I don't know that it's going to drop another 70%, but I'm fairly confident in saying that batteries are going to be cheaper for the same capacity 10 years from now than they are now. So what you're doing with this 1,000-mile range is you're paying the battery cost now to try to future-proof from replacing a battery 10 years from now, because you're theoretically going to get more longevity out of a bigger battery pack, partially due to uh, partially due to cycling. But as you know, that's not the only thing. Just time, temperature, state of charge, and use of fast charging, they all affect it. So I don't know that you can say that a 1,000-mile range battery is going to last twice as long as a 400-mile range battery. I highly doubt it, because only one of the five things that affect battery life are going to be helped by having a larger battery capacity. Okay, so anyways, I'm going for the 400-mile range, which is probably overkill for my use case scenario. 250 miles is probably fine, but every once in a while I do drive down to San Diego or something, and that is about 100 miles each way. And then that is going to be cutting it pretty close if I do some driving at the destination, or I use some climate control and there's some degradation. So this would be pushing it. I would have to find charging at the destination, which I could definitely do. I could definitely do. So I could make this work. But I think this is a slightly more. It's only $4,000 more, and it's only slightly heavier, so 200 extra pounds. And this gives me more than enough range, even if I wanted to go on a road trip. Let's say I wanted to go on a road trip, and I definitely want to stop at least every 300 miles. Like I've got to stretch my legs, go to the bathroom, get a coffee, whatever. Like I'm not going to want to drive more than 300 miles without stopping. And so I think with even if I were to go on long road trips, if it has decent DC fast charging and I want to just stop for 30 minutes every 300 miles, this is plenty. I really find the use case scenarios for 600, 1,000 miles. I can't imagine too many people that would benefit from having this kind of range. And I see a lot of people who probably do have fairly normal driving cycles looking at these two range models, which are significantly more expensive, significantly heavier, have way more environmental costs, and not much benefit in terms of battery life, and a lot of detriment. This having this amount of extra weight is going to severely impede, I think, handling and acceleration. It may help ride quality a little bit though, because then the ratio of unsprung weight to sprung weight will be smaller with the bigger battery pack. So it might make if they tune the suspension right, the heavier car will ride a little smoother probably. I don't know if that's worth all the downsides of it though. All right, well, I'm sure many of you guys will disagree with me, so I'd love to hear your comments in the section below, and thanks for watching and have a great day.